The Los Angeles Lakers had basically a perfect trade deadline, and looking at this roster, somehow through just a few small moves, I think it is theoretically possible that this team returns to being a contending level NBA team. I truly did not think that the Lakers could really pull this off, but here we are now, and looking at the roster that the Lakers have in front of them, I truly believe that they can be a serious threat in the Western Conference, if not this year, because making moves in the middle of the year can be a little bit troublesome. Next year, I think it's definitely possible. So let's talk about whether or not the Los Angeles Lakers can be contenders again. Before we get into today's video, I want to talk about this video's sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best daily fantasy app out there. To me, the best thing about it is just how accessible it is to someone who may be new to the space. Prize Picks creates projections for players' stats. It is you versus those projections. You pick 2 to 5 players and take either under or over on those stats. And depending on how many you win, you could win max money, or you could choose a flex play and still go positive even if you get one wrong. With the NBA coming back tomorrow, I picked a couple of players and I decided to take the over on Aaron Nesmith because Celtics players have a tendency Former Celtics players have a tendency to go off on the Celtics, and every other pick that I made was entirely arbitrary, but at least that one I put some strategy to. You can make entries in 60 seconds or less, and while I'm going to be sticking on the NBA side of things, there are also projections offered for the NFL, MLB, NHL, esports, NASCAR, the list goes on and on. And what's great for you is that if you have not downloaded Prize Picks already, first-time users, if they use my code RUSTY, will get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So let's say you put in 70, Prize Picks would give you 70 themselves, and now you have 140 to play with, and so on. So click the link in the description and download Prize Picks and use my code RUSTY for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. Real quick before I go ahead and get into this video, if you can go ahead and check out my most recent video, my second most recent video after this one, about LeBron James and him breaking the scoring record. It's really a career retrospective. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into it, so if you could go watch it, I would really appreciate it. It's one of the best videos I've made in a long time. Also, my second channel is nearly at 100k subs, so if you could go subscribe over there, that'd also be neat. So let's first just take a look at each individual player that the Lakers traded for and why I think they can contribute to this team significantly. So let's first talk about DAngelo Russell, because he's easily the biggest wild card of this move, at least that's what I think. D'Lo is not actually that great, although I realize his percentages lately have been much better. I would not consider D'Lo some phenomenal starting point guard. However, by comparison to what they had before in the point guard slot, and by comparison to how poor that fit was, it really is night and day. While DAngelo Russell might not be an all-star level guard like he was a couple of years ago, he is still one of the better three-point shooters in the NBA, even if he can be a little bit inconsistent, and he's still a really good playmaker, and he's still capable of creating his own shot, even if his efficiency is not the best, and even if he doesn't get to the rim all that well. At the end of the day, it's a better option than what Russell Westbrook was, it's a better option than what Patrick Beverly was, much better floor spacing instantaneously. Then we get to Malik Beasley, who I said in a video that did not get released is going to be one of the players that you get the most bang for your buck in, and he pretty much just seemed to get thrown into this one. For all intents and purposes, Malik Beasley is one of the better three-point shooters in the NBA, while this year with the Utah Jazz, his percentage has just been down to about 35-36%. His volume is still high, and for the last 2 years on the Minnesota Timberwolves, he has shot over 8 threes a game on like 38%-ish. So one of the better three-point shooters in the league, and he really just appeared to be a throw-in in this deal. So that's a really big get for the Lakers as well, a team that is obviously desperately in need of shooting. So if you just compare the previous starting backcourt of Patrick Beverly and Lonnie Walker and the three-point capability that they had, or even worse if you put Russell Westbrook back in that starting lineup because he was still ultimately playing starters minutes, looking at the shooting difference between D'Lo and Malik Beasley and those two or even three players, if you want to throw them all together, it is a night and day difference. The shooting has been overhauled dramatically by the Lakers, and just by acquiring 2 different players. Now let's talk about my favorite player in this deal, and potentially the best player, and that is Jarred Vanderbilt. Vando is not someone who's going to bring much to the table offensively. He can get you some offensive rebounds, he can get you some backdoor cuts, some dunks, some transition stuff, all that. Pretty good finisher, and maybe he'll hit an open 3-pointer here or there, but really not a floor spacer whatsoever. The guy is just not much offensively, but he makes up for it and somehow manages to be, to me, the best player in this deal by being a phenomenal defensive player. Like, straight up, if Vanderbilt was somebody who had gotten national coverage last year, he didn't because he was on the Timberwolves, obviously, he might have got some all-defensive conversation. Like, he would have been in that conversation if he was on a franchise like, let's say, the Lakers. So I could very well see that ending up happening next year. But yeah, Jarred Vanderbilt is a seriously good and versatile defender. Can, without a doubt, guard 1 through 4 and can defend most 5s. And when I think about what this team is capable of defensively, especially him next to Anthony Davis, they could genuinely lock up to an extreme degree now that they have Vando on this team. Now let's talk about the other move, which was Mo Bamba. Mo is kind of been inconsistent throughout his entire career, but at least right now he's a pretty plus defender, even if he's a little bit disappointing from what his projection was going to the NBA. But ultimately still a good shot blocker, still decent enough at covering a lot of space because of his long arms, and he hits his threes for the most part. Not super high volume, not a crazy high percentage, but if you give him an open 3, he is more than capable of knocking that down, and to the point that I think the defense has to worry about it to some degree, which is perfect for if you're going to run a lineup that has Anthony Davis at the 4, because you have a center out there who is capable of spacing. They traded Thomas Bryant, who was also someone who was capable of shooting, but was pretty much always naturally more of a pick and roll and interior guy, even if he could do that perimeter stuff, whereas now you have someone in Mo Bamba who will be pretty content just sitting in the corner the whole time. And when I think about the defense this team could potentially roll out, like if you do Vando, AD, and Mo Bamba as your bigs and wing, man, that's pretty damn good. I don't know defensively what you do with your guard situation there, because they don't have anyone great and defensively at the guard spots, but those 3 alone defensively, phenomenal. Hell, put LeBron at shooting guard and, like, I guess just let D'Lo be out there, because D'Lo can be fine defensively. It depends, really. Either way, I think the Lakers have a ton of potential to be a top 5 defense in the league, potentially even top 1. And offensively speaking, the difference in 3-point shooting and shot creation that this team has added is rather significant. Because while Malik Beasley has played like 3 games for the Lakers and 2 of them were bad and the other one was like a 20-point game, he's someone who's capable of creating his own shot from time to time. Not someone you want doing it a lot, but if he catches on the perimeter, pump fakes, loses man, and does a dribble pull-up from mid-range, you're cool with that shot. You know, he's capable of doing a little bit off of the dribble, and he's such a nice shooter that if he's shooting the ball, generally it's not a terrible shot. Occasionally he throws up a bad look, but you know, is what it is. Same thing, D'Lo, I mentioned earlier. His shot creation, there's room to be desired 100%, but by comparison to what the Lakers had before in the shot creation department, they had sometimes Lonnie Walker did something. Kendrick Nunn would try to do it, but shoot like 30% from the field. Russell Westbrook can't hit a jumper to save his life. Patrick Beverly is not doing anything but hitting a spot up 3. Ultimately, they went from a bunch of players who have no shot creation skill really whatsoever, and if they do, it's not efficient, to players who have a little bit of those skills and can do it at decent efficiency. Throwing in Rui Hachimura into this, he is someone who, if there's 5 seconds on the shot clock, you just give him the ball, he can get a decent look. I'm not saying these are things that you want to be the foundation of your offense, but having players on your team who just can put the ball on the basket in multiple different contexts on the floor at the same time really matters, because you will generally run into a versatile amount of context. Multiple different shots are going to be created, so it helps to have the players that can actually make them. I know that sounds like obvious, but based on how the Lakers have been constructing this roster over the past couple of years, it really seems like they don't know the obvious stuff, so it seems nice that they do now. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. That is Anthony Davis's health, really. I think it entirely comes down to that, because I think from a depth perspective, from a shooting perspective, while the shooting could still be better, sure, they could have some more depth in the shooting department. Like but Lonnie Walker now is coming off of the bench and he was one of their better shooters. Like if you're looking at this team, they have a ton of depth and a lot of offense and a lot of defense. I do think it's kind of hard to say that when healthy and when chemistry is there, I think it'd be hard to say that this team isn't contender level unless LeBron James completely falls off. He seemed like he was going to do that early on in the year, but he picked it back up and he's averaging 39 and 7 again. So I still think you have two superstar players on this team and you have a bunch of depth and a bunch of shooting, especially by comparison to what you had. Ultimately, what it comes down to is Anthony Davis going to be healthy? If he is, I would be scared to face this team. I don't even know if they're necessarily going to make the playoffs this year, but they're in the play-in conversation right now. And if I'm not mistaken, let me pull this up real quick. Yeah, the Lakers are literally like a 5-game difference from the 5 seed, you know? So if they just went on a little bit of a run, they could fully just steamroll teams, you know? They could fully just be a really higher seeded, not a higher seeded, but at least definitely solidly in the playoffs and maybe even avoid the play-in. The Western Conference is separated by such a small amount of games. Like 32 wins for the Phoenix Suns is the 5 seed and 29 wins is the 9 seed for the Golden State Warriors. There's plenty of room for them to get themselves a playoff spot, and if everybody is healthy, I think they'd be a problem. But if I was going to project and predict, something that I've talked about multiple times when talking about deadline stuff this time around has been that trading for a player in the middle of the year, trading for multiple players especially, kind of hard to get the chemistry correct. I will give them this though. They have a bunch of former Timberwolves players. Like D'Lo, Malik Beasley, Jarred Vanderbilt, those are the 3 players that I hope will be in the starting lineup along with LeBron and AD. I think that's the most optimal lineup. All of those players have played together, so they have chemistry between themselves. AD and LeBron obviously have their chemistry, so it could work out sooner than later. But if I were going to bet, I'd say this year they look good, maybe even make like a strong second round out. And then next year, if LeBron can just do it again for one more year, that's what they're asking, that's what they need. If LeBron can do it for one more year and Anthony Davis can be healthy, then anything is possible, truly. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Los Angeles Lakers. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.